In today's video, we're making another real simple gift idea. I use this large tag, which is just MDF chipboard, and it is perfect for, it's pretty sturdy and it's perfect for supporting this mirror and some decoupage paper. So the first thing I did is I decoupaged this dragonfly paper from Roy Cycled On, but unfortunately that video did not come through. So I'm showing you after it was already on, and I am sanding off the excess on the edges. So to prep that board, all I did was put a primer on it, and then I went ahead and decoupaged the paper down with my YSL varnish. And I am putting a couple extra coats of varnish on this piece, partly because I know it's going to get a little heavy use. It's really a portable mirror that I'm giving as a gift. And the other reason is I'm going to be adding lots of molds to this piece, and I'm going to be putting a antiquing glaze on them, and I want to make sure that I'm able to wipe it off if I need to. So what I'm going to put on the back of this to keep this mirror on is I'm using heavy body gel from Pentart. It's a heavy duty medium, and it is really, really good for holding these little bit of awkward or heavier pieces. So I'm going to put a pretty even coat on the back, and I also want to make sure that it doesn't ooze out the side. I really want to not have to spend a lot of time trying to get the glue off of the paper. So I put it on and put it down without pushing it to get the glue to squeeze out the side. And then I'm making my molds, and I'm using the primitive mold by IOD. I'm using resin, which I have put gray milk paint powder in with to give it that color. So I am actually not going to paint this at all. I am just going to put some gold paste on top of it to give it highlights. I used quite a few castings, but I just keep making them and gluing them down right away using the tight bound thick and quick glue, and wiping away any excess with a little Q-tip. And as I get to the top, obviously they're not exactly the same size, so they're real easy to cut if you do it right away when they first come out of the mold. And I have to cut and shape a couple just so they'll fit into the top. And I just do this all the way around till I'm done. The last little bit of molding is a berry, which is also off of the same mold primitive. And then I am going to go around the whole side, the whole edge of this mirror with, not the mirror, the whole edge of the tag with another one of the castings that comes from the primitive mold. It's a branch, a long branch, and it's perfect for going around the edge. And you can see the two that I had to cut to fit in that last little piece. But it worked out perfect. Once all the mirror trim was done, it was time to do the trim around the edges. Now I only have one primitive mold, so it took me a long time to mold all the pieces and then start another one, cut it, glue it, mold another piece. So what I'm showing you is kind of the last of putting the molding on, the castings on. And it's just a little tiny little vine. It's just really, really pretty. It really reminds me of some sewing trim or some upholstery trim around the edges of upholstery. It's just a really, really pretty trim. So I finished by getting that all along the edges, and that last little one was a pain in the because I had let it stay in the mold just a little too long, so it wasn't as pliable as the rest. and it was very hard to get it to do a straight edge, and it kept wanting to curve. But finally, it succumbed to my pressure, and then it was all done. I also went ahead and I wanted to repeat the dragonfly. So I took the monarch mold, which is a mold from IOD, which is butterflies and insect. And I made two of the little dragonflies and I glued them on and I made them out of the exact same um, resin that I had put some of the um, powdered milk paint in. And then I put a little bit of gold on their edges and put a little bit of purple of the glitter glue purple just to kind of accent that purple there. And the very last thing you see what I'm doing here is I am taking the antique paste, and this is brass, and I'm going around the whole, every little piece of casting that I did. And what that did is it really made it look like metal. It takes a little while for the antiquing paste to dry, but it does come out really and really nice. It keeps that nice deep color. Here I am putting the purple glitter glue, and of course the glue comes out. It's a little thicker, but it does dry flat, and it just added enough of an accent for the dragonflies not to kind of fade into the background. And once that glitter glue was dry, I went ahead and I put the gold on the wings, and here it is, totally finished. So for project number two, I am using this mirror, which I got at a yard sale. It is made out of particle board, and the corners, the particle board is coming off a little bit, and the writing and the painting are a little bit faded. So we're gonna decoupage a paper over it that makes it look like it's metal. So, first thing I did is I have to take the backing off so I'm not working with the mirror on it. So we took that mirror off, and then it was time to wash that frame really well. So after I washed it, then I went ahead and put a coat of bonding primer on it. And the reason I use the bonding primer is that it allows anything to stick to it. It works really, really well. I'm not trying to cover up that the floral or the totally or even the writing. I'm just trying to give it a surface that I know that my decoupage medium is going to stick to. So once that is dry, it's time to start some decoupage. It is a little tricky to decoupage a mirror, and really what we're doing is decoupaging a frame, and this frame has a curved edge and a little indentation, so it makes it a little bit even more difficult. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I cut the paper, the for the shorter ends first, and I should have cut the paper for the longer ends. So I ended up having to piece a little more than I should have. But it worked out anyway. So what I do is I overlap it, and then I'm going to cover up any one of those spots where they are overlapped with a casting. So the first thing I did is start at the bottom. I cut the piece and I left some for the inside and some extra paper for the outside. And then I did the decoupage, the sides. I did not pull that paper down over the edges right away. I just decoupaged the flat surface of the frame. This paper is called corrugated metal, and it is a decoupage tissue paper, and it is put out by Roy Cycle Treasures, and it is one of my favorites. If you love vintage, you usually like rusty metal, and how nice to have rusty metal that isn't really rusty. So I like to use this paper to kind of give it the look of metal. And you notice that I made sure that both sides were just slightly different so that it didn't look even. The mirror frame is a little bigger than my table, which is one of the reasons it's not quite in the frame all the time. So I have to keep moving it. But I do all four sides, and then I start to do the outs, pull the paper along the outside, and then I will pull the paper into the inside. I do my top coat, I seal my paper. Tissue paper is a little bit weak once it gets the medium on it. So I'm going to go ahead and put a top coat on this and let this totally dry so that I have a little more strength to my paper before I start manipulating it again around the corner, around the edges. The bottom edges are much easier to do because they're straight and they're flat. So I do spritz it a little bit, the bottom of the paper, so that it's going to stretch around the edge. And then I decoupage it along that at flat edge and underneath, pull it underneath. And I do all four outside edges just like this. And if I have extra paper, I just overlap it and pull it underneath. It doesn't matter. And that way my paper is totally flat along the outside edge. Now, sometimes there's not quite enough in certain places. Now, when you're doing the inside, again, you've got that edge, that little indentation to get that paper into. You have to um, you have to spritz that paper a little bit so that that's going to stretch into that little indentation and then go around the curve and go underneath. Getting the paper to go around that rounded edge on the inside and that indentation is probably the most tedious of this entire project. But if you do it slowly, it works, and you just have to go with your paper. It's going to bend a little. And then you end up with these little spaces where the paper didn't quite meet. And what are you going to do there? I'm going to use the rust effects set from Pentart, and I'm going to duplicate the rust that I have on the rest of the frame because of the corrugated metal paper, which has lots of rust in it. This rust set comes with 4 different colors and some 3D paper, and I'm just gonna pop that into those corners and anywhere else where the paper may have ripped a little bit or the paper didn't quite cover. And even in the corners where the actual underneath mirror was damaged, so it was puffed up a little bit. It didn't lay totally flat. I'm putting a little rust there also. And then I get to make my birds. And this is resin. It is 10-minute white resin, which I have added again, the gray milk paint powder. And I add just enough to color it. But you see, it really gets pretty even, and it is really, it's fine. I don't have to do anything else to it except put on an antiquing glaze or an antiquing wax afterwards, just to highlight the incredible detail of this bird mold. And I take them out again when they're still a little tiny bit warm or soft. And you saw me kind of needling it out of the corner. And once I get it out, it's perfectly fine. And it is ready for the next step, which what I am going to do is I am making these birds look like antique metal. So that we've already got the gray color of a galvanized metal. And now I am going to use the Pentart Rust Effects kit. And I am going to make these look rusty. So I'm putting some on a plate. Again, there's four different colors and a 3D powder, which you use to get this great crusty, rusty effect. And I'm going to show you how I do it. I just start dabbing into the paint and then into the 3D effects, and I mix the colors up. No, nothing gets a solid coat of anything. I just keep putting a little bit of those four different colors, and you know when it's done, it starts to look like an old rusty metal bird. And while I'm painting them, I try to leave some of the gray showing through. The smaller, tiny ones, it's a little harder, but if you just leave a little bit of the gray coming through, it really gives you that vintage metal, antique rusty look. And once I'm satisfied with the looks of the birds, I'm just going to leave them to dry. And once they're thoroughly dry, then I can glue them on to my project. And here is one that is thoroughly dry, well rusted, that I have just put a little bit of wax on the wings. And now it is time to glue them down. And I am basically gluing these in pairs, and I am putting them over the places where the paper meets on my mirror. I am using the Type-On Quick and Thick glue and just gluing them down. I love this big bird. It came out so cool. Just enough of the gray showing through to give you that look of metal. It is actually the biggest bird on that bird's mold. And here's the top corners being glued, the little birds. And one by one, I glued down all of the birds, and I left them overnight to dry because there were quite a bit of glue that I had to use, and they were pretty heavy, and I really wanted to make sure that they had a really good fix. And just like that, it was all done. The very last bird. And you can see some of the color, the yellow, the gold, and when you mix it up, it really looks like authentic rust. And here is a picture, a close-up of one of the sets of birds, and you can see how rusty they look. And there's the whole mirror. And that's it, an old mirror that I got at a yard sale for just about nothing turned into a really awesome decoupaged rusty bird mirror.